in whatever you do. Remember the golden rules of art. Curiosity over fear. Learn rules before breaking them. And hydrate and stretch, of which I don't do as much as I should. But you should definitely do that. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Asher. Today I am going to start the first in a series of short tutorials talking about how I draw certain things, starting of course with the head and face. This isn't going to include hair, that's going to be the next video. So to get started, this is where I first learned how to draw heads. I got this from the library many times when I was a teenager. This is Shoujo Beats Manga Artist Academy. It was this page specifically that I learned how to draw heads from. You can see it's pretty simple. It has the circle with the little cross in order to have guidelines. We see a couple tilts on the side there. Pretty simple, basic version of drawing a head. And if we flip the page, then we see a couple examples of faces. This is obviously just looking straight on, and this is more about expressions than anything else, going from neutral to a more extreme happy expression. I do really love this book, and I'm glad that I got my own copy of it. However, as we'll see later, I don't really use this method as much anymore unless I'm trying to be quick. First, we're going to just do a couple examples of this, of simply drawing a circle, drawing the guidelines directly in between. This is a very direct still shot. We can see that I put a little dot for the nose, quite a little bit under the cross, and then I start doing the eyes. The bottom of the eyes follows that middle section that goes horizontally across the head, and I kind of just have a guess of where to put the tops of the eyes just from years and years of practice. I've got little eyebrows going, and then we do the face. You notice how the side doesn't match up exactly with the circle. Again, it's just as guidelines. Of course, we're going to do a 3/4 shot is what these are called. We have the nose, which starts right from where the guidelines intersect. The bottom of the eyes goes right on that intersection line. And I don't really draw like this anymore unless I'm trying to be pretty quick or I'm maybe doing more of a American cartoon style, and I'll talk a little bit about that next when I start talking about how I draw faces more now, just because this way I think doesn't have as much guidance as could be useful. Doesn't mean it's wrong, just means it's not for me. Here I'm working on the dreaded profile, which I hate doing profile shots so much. I find them really difficult. I don't know if I have much tips for doing profiles just because it's something that I still personally find kind of challenging. You can see that I still used that circle guide, and it almost looked like I was doing a straight on shot with the guides in the middle. That's just for where the ear goes and where the eyes and the curve of the nose goes, the bridge of the nose. Which honestly, knowing where the ear is at all times and where the nose goes is honestly really helpful for drawing and for having your face in the right direction, in the right spot to be able to place everything else. Here you can kind of see it. I talk about it a lot more in the next part because I just have more guidelines, but you see that the tops of the ears tend to cut right through the middle of the eyes, while the bottom of the ears come right to connect to where the nose is. About 2 years ago, I decided to relearn a lot of my foundations when it comes to drawing. I wasn't really satisfied with what I was doing, so I decided to start studying for probably the first time ever. I used this book, Simplified Forms from Morpho by Michael Lauricella, a lot, and I really think it's a good one for anybody who does more stylized artwork of people. Just because it uses basic shapes and forms, and I think it's a lot more useful for that more stylized type of art style. There's obviously just a lot to pull from it, and it doesn't get too caught up in anatomy, in knowing specific muscles and bones, just the stuff that you need to know on a more basic level to get the shapes that you need. One of the things I did do when I was doing this was trying to mimic what was in the book and then trying to kind of transform that from that version to more my art style and seeing what in the middle maybe works for me a bit better. The thing I realized was the way that I was drawing before was making it so the proportions of the face and the head were not what I wanted it to be. I think I was making them a bit too squished, and by using this book I found a different way that works a lot better for me and makes for faces that are more proportional to what I want to be drawing. I was also watching Evangelion at the time, which was definitely an influence and kind of a direction that I wanted to lean into. Here is actually a breakdown of me studying the face and how things should be placed in proportion to one another. You can see here where I just made my faces fit the hair and the size of the head a lot better than what I was doing before. Now I will do a circle. I still make those cross guidelines where the horizontal one goes through the middle of the circle. However, the vertical one is longer. It just goes down a little bit further. The longer you make that, the more thin and long the face is going to be. You can also see that the edge of the circle now becomes the space where the jaw curves into the chin, and that's also helpful. The top of that horizontal guide is the top of the ear, and the spot where that vertical guide meets the bottom of the circle is actually where the nose will go. Of course, you can just fit the mouth in underneath that. Another thing that is different now is that the top of the eyes actually goes where that horizontal line guide is instead of the bottom of the eyes, because the top portion of that circle is the skull. It's where all of that hair should go, or the head if they don't have any hair. With the 3/4 profile view, it follows very similar rules. We have the nose going about at the point where the circle meets the up-down line, and we know exactly where the ear is going to go. Again, knowing where the ear and the nose goes is just really helpful for being able to place the rest of the face. While I don't think that the previous version that I learned was bad, I really don't, and it definitely works for whoever uses it. It worked for me for years, but one of the things I realized it was limiting me on was the literal skull, which is kind of what the circle part is here now, is the bulk of your cranium, while the lower part is the jaw, if you want to think of it that way. This basic version is a circle for, like I said, the skull and just a tall cross. For the profile, I actually do find this a bit more helpful. Like I said, I struggle with profile pics. I struggle with profile views, profile drawings. I just need to remember that the curve of the jaw comes down to the bottom of that circle and to extend out from that. Admittedly, I'm sure I would get better at this if I simply practiced more, because that is definitely the number one thing that you should do as an artist, is both practice and try. While I do think that profiles are hard, you can still see here that the bottom of the ear is directly across where the nose is, and the top of the ear is across where the top of the eyes or the eyebrow is, and the curve of the forehead into the bridge of the nose. Now for some cool tips and tricks. If we just do a quick little head here, make the little across guideline, and we have the straight across horizontal guideline tilting up to show that the character is looking up. One thing to note is that when a character is looking up, the nose will be kind of higher on that skull. So instead of connecting to where the bottom of the circle is because it's tilted up, it's more like if you can imagine another horizontal line going from the bottom of the ear around, that's where the middle of the nose is going to be. Fritz, stop grumbling, I'm doing something. And we'll draw the ears. Again, if you just think of a similar line going across that has that same curve as the horizontal guide, that's where the nose is going to connect with the up-down line that's going through the center. The important part, especially, is that the ear is below the eyes. Ears should be below the eye line. The further down below, the more it's going to look like the character is tilting even more up, is looking further up. And if a character is looking straight on, then the ears should be level with the eyes. Now, if a character is looking down, it's going to be the reverse, meaning that the ears are going to move up. They are going to look like they are above where the eyes are. Fun fact, this is kind of how things work for perspective if you're drawing backgrounds and you think about the camera being up high or center or down low. But that will be a video for a different time. For a looking down figure, it works essentially the same way as something looking straight on. As I said, the main difference is just that you're going to be moving the ears up compared to where the eyes are, but the nose will go in the same place as before, where it connects with where the vertical up-down line connects with the bottom of the guide circle. I did not take the time to really give examples of how to draw necks, even though they are pretty simple. The only rule I would say is try not to have things perpendicular as much as possible. Giving them a little bit of a curve just gives a little bit more character, and that comes with drawing and with character design in general. When things are perpendicular, they can be kind of boring, so making sure to try to not do that unless it's for something that is strict or is very, what's a good word for it, solid in nature. Humans are not necessarily solid, but buildings are, for example, so buildings have a lot of straight edges and straight lines. For characters and people, I do think it's good to try to just have a little bit of curve in there. Something that you can do with necks, though, that even though it's so simple, is just making them come from different directions, or giving a little bit of a curve, or making it so that the head maybe goes one way while the neck is really coming from a different direction, can add a lot of character in a really simple way. I highly would recommend testing things out and trying different ideas and really pushing to the extreme of what maybe of where you can put a neck and still make it look like it works. One more little tip that I don't remember when I picked this up, but I'm sure other people have heard of this before. I give a really bad example here, but that is okay. Is that the eyes should be about one eye width apart from one another. If you have more narrower eye designs or wider eye designs, that might affect how they look or how big that space would be. But if you're going for a little bit more of an anime look or realistic proportions, then you want about 1 eye width in between the 2 eyes. It's kind of like if you imagine there is a 3rd eye right above it. That's the space that it needs. And one thing about the drawing here that you can kind of see is that I did not do any guidelines, and it does not look as good as my other drawings, but it still is recognizable, and that's simply from years and years and years of using those guidelines and building up these habits. The guidelines are not something that you need to use permanently. It's mostly just to build up habits and foundations and to train your eye and to train your hand to get a better idea of where things should be, of what it should look like, till eventually you don't even need to use them anymore. I, of course, do still use them, but there are times where I don't need to, and I can just jump that step. It's still important to build up those skills and those foundations though, and that's kind of what I'm trying to teach with these videos, is what my foundations are and where I picked them up and why I picked them up, which might be useful for you or it might not. Please just take what is good for you, and if it's not, then let it go and be like, yeah, cool that that works for that person. It doesn't work for me, and I'm gonna keep learning and keep doing my thing. Okay, now we've gone over how I draw heads and where I place things and what the guidelines are all about. So what do you do now? Now you get to practice. And there are so many sources that you can use for practicing. The most obvious one is to study real life. Draw your friends, maybe draw photos of people that you like, draw people on television shows or movies that you like. The other thing you can do is study other artists that you like and admire. These can be classic artists like Leyendecker is really amazing. You can look at maybe Michelangelo. You can look at your favorite comic artist as well, or your favorite cartoonists. One of the things that is so easy to skip, or that doesn't get taught, especially when you're a self-taught artist, is to do warm-ups though, so do not forget to do your warm-ups. This is a really simple warm-up of just drawing a bunch of circles, and as you can see, circles are really important for drawing heads. It is the basis for the shape of the skull. You need to get pretty good at drawing circles. Something you can also do with this exercise is after you draw a bunch of quick little circles is maybe you can turn some of those into quick faces. This can be a good way to practice drawing various expressions. I haven't talked too much in the video as of yet about expressions and about what to use or how to draw expressions, because it's really something that's best learned from practice and experience and from studying other artists. Looking at artists that you admire and seeing what they do, or just looking at a bunch of various artists, especially from comics and manga and animation, can be a really good resource for practicing faces. The grid of expressions can also be really useful if you want to try to draw the same character doing different faces over and over. I guess a good little tip is for the eyebrows to kind of guide into each other, because eyebrows, the way they work is that they are kind of connected. You should theoretically be able to draw a line, whether that's curved or whether that's straight up into a point, from one eyebrow to the other, making sure that they are connected and they're not just going off in different directions can be helpful. As I said, with necks, you can have them coming from different directions. We have one that I drew where the neck is definitely coming from one side of the head, but the person is looking in the opposite direction, kind of like they're reacting to something, or they're looking at something over their shoulder perhaps. Or the one of the character laughing, I have their head tilted so far up that you can actually see the underside of their head and where the neck connects to the head, so I don't have the chin line in there. To wrap up, here is a couple quick studies of some things I just had lying around. I used a DVD case and a couple books that I have just to show how anything can be a resource and a source of inspiration and a source of drawing. To anyone who made it this far, who made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching. I hope something here was useful. I do think that there's something that can be learned from anyone, no matter how long you've been doing one thing or another. Something to note about my schedule though is I've been trying to do weekly posts since I got started. I've only been doing this about a month or so. And the weekly posts are not working. They are driving me crazy. I just don't have enough time to do them up to the level that I want. Therefore, I'm going to be dropping down to once every 2 weeks instead. I think that'll be a much more manageable schedule for me, and it'll still be more than I was posting before. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I believe, the next tutorial is going to be about how to draw hair, of which there's just so many different tips, tricks, types, variety, options. There's just so much that can go into drawing hair. There's a lot of choices that somebody can make about drawing hair, about how they want to draw hair. And if there are any other drawing tips that you know of, please share them in the comments and I would love to read them or try them out. Like and subscribe if you wish. I hope you have a wonderful day, week, whatever, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!